was having an interesting conversation with Tomas and Lily last night. I lived in Brazil for a number of years and spent some time in the Amazon with more indigenous people, and I was very curious. You mentioned some sample sets with indigenous people. So I was curious, is the sample set very Western-based? If you include more people from the global South or indigenous populations, does it change the results and structures much?
That's a very good question. I wished we had actually data, like sentence completion data from indigenous folks. I'm part of some indigenous communities on the internet, and I have observed, living also and visiting, that there are just different ways of even understanding what is a human being. Lake Ubuntu in South Africa, the concept of an individual separate from the community and separate from the interaction, the dialogic interaction among people, is just different. I am because you are, and you are because I am, and not we're separate individuals. And recently I read Roger Walsh's new edition of shamanism, and a lot of what I understand even better is through his examination of that and shamanistic paths to development. Ways of, for instance, people being selected in the community to become shamans and then go through very intricate and long and difficult initiation journeys. And in those are different, and there are people in those communities who have knowledge both from above and below and sideways from spirits that are fundamentally different than we see things, but they're highly, highly knowledgeable and intuitive and can see things that we, from our Western sort of mindset and training, can't even. I recommend, if you're interested, to read Roger Walsh's new edition. It really is enlightening to me. And I've worked with in the development goals people, because I felt I was an original member of it, because I felt it was way too, not even Western, but Northern Western. Since then, they have actually opened, and they now have places, I think, across the world where there is more local exploration of what the most important values are. That's the best I can do to your answer. But what did you experience that you can describe as different?
Well, I guess two things. Yeah, firstly, so one of the things I do is teach meditation, and then I was living in Brazil teaching there, and we tried to introduce integral theory because we thought that was very important, like stages of development. But their reaction was, it looks very patriarchal and linear, and it doesn't.
It is.
It doesn't seem to value indigenous knowledge.
Yes.
So that was one thing, which I enjoyed you touching on that in your presentation yesterday. And the other thing was again, in Brazil, we would meet people that had incredibly high social intelligence and social capital. So there was one lady, particularly we worked with in the Amazon, who was, she couldn't work any technology, and she had no sort of understanding of bank balances, but she had this incredible social intelligence and ethical intelligence that was really special. Everywhere we traveled, we just mentioned her name, and they were, yes, Liliana. And so yeah, just that was kind of the experience, that it's like, I don't know how to speak to or capture those differences within the model.
And that's what I also critique in the book I'm writing, finally I'm writing about that. And half of the book is about looking at developmental theories of the West from a bigger perspective. And as wonderful as they are, you know how committed I am to ego development, I'm also seeing its very peculiar, weird aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't take away from the good, and it doesn't take away from the good of integral, for instance, but we do need to have a little bit a broader conception of what matters. Have insights and capacities that simply are not on our lists of what's important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There you go, Tom. Over to you. Do you want to grab the mic?
Hi, Suzanne.
Hi, Tom.
Good to see you. Can we see that table again she put up yesterday?
Yes. The data table?
Yeah, the data set.
Yes. I
Can I
have
see
it on.
Well,
Yes.
suppose I don't have it handy. Where is it? Let me get it for myself as well.
Voila.
Okay, we have it on the screen for people here, Suzanne.
Yeah, I need to see it too, so I can actually make.
Tell me when you're ready.
Yes, so that
Yep,
is
I'm just-
slide 13 on your slides.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
So, Suzanne,
Yeah, now I see it on the screen as well. Okay.
tell me if I'm interpreting this correctly. I see 4 sets of data separated
Yes.
by the years. And were you telling us that even though the data looks like it's growing, the equivalency between the samples are not equal? Is the correlation matrix table actually different on all 4 sets of data?
It's just that because you have to include the time element, the very early ones, the ones before 2000, to me seemed the most representative samples. Mostly what I used for my dissertation, 4,500 plus. That was really, really a broad sample. It had people who were priests and people who were incarcerated. It had, now I'm double, triple, interesting. It had people who were actuaries and people who were artists. It had people who were in mental institutions and in prisons. It really was a broad sample. And the later stages after 2000s, once integral theory became familiar, it contains primarily people who are already informed in developmental theories and therefore try on these different measures. There's this very strong feeling that people are trying hard to get, up higher on these levels, and more people from informed people, more professional people take the test.
Okay, so
And
this...
I no longer have access to those earlier ones.
So the samples aren't equivalent, and that's why they can't be compared or combined. Is that correct?
In that sense, yes. I think it's important to keep them sequential so that does not get confused and we don't just average the numbers.
Okay. Is it fair to say, and I'm adopting a little Suzanne's provocateur here, is it fair to say then, we don't have proof of growth, but we don't have proof there's no growth either?
Correct.
A type 2 error is possible right now.
Absolutely. I wished it was definitely the error on the side of, yes, we are advancing as society, but look around. Look at how much of our culture and our society is really seem to be very early. And given the recent happenings, I actually went back to a book I read when I first came to this country in '76 called Anti-Intellectualism in America. And it still rings very, very true. There is large segments of this country who are undereducated and are proud of it. That's the thing that gets me. And, you know, all the trends that are happening right now, it doesn't look... And there are human beings, I think, across the world who are mature and who are trying to go. It has a lot to do with values and interest in not just espousing what you believe and insisting this is how that's the truth, and people who are open minds. And yet it's hard to keep open mind in all this stuff that's going on, all the theories that are being thrown around. I can see why I get tired. I get tired to listen to all the things, now I can't think of the word, the theories that are just invented. What do you call them?
Metaphysics.
I have to turn this off. I wish it was conspiratorial theories invented to, you know, the nonsense about autism, for instance. I just read an article on that, on Nautilus, what's happening in that field. So many fields are now being questioned.
Yep.
Craig Cook.
Oh, sorry about that.
It's okay. Can I ask you another question, Suzanne?
Just a second. I don't know why he's calling me. I turned it off. Yes, please. Does that make any sense to you?
Yes.
I agree with you. I wished there was an error.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm curious about your arc configuration about development. Does your data actually shows that complexity drops off at some age?
Age or level?
Well, you did say maturity on the bottom axis, so that would be level, right? Is that true?
Yes. And
Craig Cook.
I'm so sorry.
Level of development, not just age.
So it's not just age.
Craig, I'm in the middle of conversations with people. What do you need to know?
Thank you. And we need to call you on our landline and have you pick up and get them the code that
This is a real-world conversation.
I cannot do it right now. I'm having in a room with people that I need to talk to. Do it after 12, please.
For the very natural sort of fireside chat feeling.
That's funny.
Life intruding, isn't that
That's
interesting?
We were saying, Suzanne, it makes a lovely sort of warm, intimate feeling because it's just like being at home.
Yes.
So I understand that with maturity, complexity drops. That's what you were saying?
Not even with Satori, even it drops at the later stages. The stage 5, 6, the construct aware, is the one where the ego makes its most extreme efforts to map reality. And then once you get beyond that, you realize it's all constructed, and then you can relax.
Oh, I
You
like
can
that.
see that coming back to simplicity is actually a huge gain in terms of development.
So we can
Being in the
actually,
here and now, you don't need all that complexity.
so at that time, we can actually present and simplify everything. That's why the complexity drops?
Yes, and you know the famous stories about, carrying water, chopping wood, carrying water, going up the mountain, learn all the wonderful complexities, and then come back. And yes, when you come back, you still carry water, you still chop wood, but of course you have a completely different inner attitude towards what you're doing. I think that's what I meant with that.
Let's hear from someone online, and then we go back to the room. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yes. Thank you, Suzanne. So there is a participant online. Her name, the name is Camille. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. So she has 2 questions. The first one is, if you were to be positively critical of the grand integral theory's fundamentals, in order to balance your perspective, what is it you would stress as key contributions of spiral dynamics, AQAL, to be protected and maintained throughout a potential evolution or update?
First of all, I want to share with you that I actually talked to Ken about my critiques before I did them, because I thought that was important, because I very deeply appreciate Integral and all it can do. It just occurred to me that once you settle, once you make something ossified, is the word I used, a theory, it is very difficult to change it, and it doesn't need to be changed. But people need to have an awareness that the fundamental idea that ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, the other way around. No, this is the correct one. That may be a faulty premise, and that it's actually more complex than that. And not to take, I use a strong word here, these theories for sacrosanct. And especially when I'm been in South Africa with the spiral dynamics folks, I really did feel they were idealizing things and totally unopen to any kind of critique, whereas with Ken I can't say that. The kinds of, just almost a cult. And also that in South Africa, the word master, can you imagine? I mentioned that briefly, what reaction that gets. And just no sense that that could be painful for some people, to even be reminded that, and to imagine there is such a thing as a master code. That to me is part where spiral dynamics goes too far. That there are codes and that there are patterns, by all means, yes. But a master code for human meaning making, I'm not there yet. And I may never be.
Thank you, Suzanne. And then Camille's second question is, what is the broader perspective you are talking about when you say you want to look at the integral theory from a broader perspective in your new book?
Just from outside, from a more global perspective, where other ways of growing are also included, not just a linear sort of upward and onward Western perspective.
Thank you, Suzanne. Yes, the floor is back to you.
Okay, so I'm David Cigoi from Slovenia. And I would like to ask you whether you know about the World Values Survey and the
Which
way...
survey? I didn't quite understand.
Yeah, World Values Survey.
You mean the flourishing surveys from Templeton University?
No. So the sociologists have been doing the survey of values around the world, covering now already 90 or 95% of the world population. By this, they kind of, in the background, they observe the process of liberation and emancipation, which actually, after all, unleashes the human potential. So then Christian Welzel, who is now the heir of all this knowledge, the heir from Ronald Inglehart, famous sociologist who passed away, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, he wrote a book, Freedom Rising. And in this book, he explains how people, actually by becoming more and more free, they do not become less and less responsible, but more and more. Yeah, this is the surprising thing. I believe that we can, once we understand this knowledge from what these sociologists say, we can even talk about another dimension. We can talk maybe about a horizontal dimension in the structure. You know, if we know now the vertical dimension, maybe another horizontal dimension can be added. Now, as I come from Slovenia and I speak Serbo-Croatian language too, I can tell you that I've been observing the people of ex-Yugoslavia for years and years. And these people, these societies have turned out in the research called optimal human functioning around the world, which was performed a few years ago. They found themselves at the bottom of, you know, optimal human functioning. And I kind of sense why that was so. You know, then after all, we can come to the conclusion that if you live in an environment which is kind of full of dominance, not democratic, and full of violence, but with this I mean maybe just psychological violence, not physical necessarily, then you are kind of really, then you build strong ego defense system, and this breaks your development, and your kind of attitude towards life, towards world, is defensive and actually defiant. Yeah, that's why then, and such people perform then even more violence, you know, psychologically, and create, in a way, maybe for them, even pleasant environment, you know, but on the other side, unpleasant. Yeah, both at the same time, somehow a bit difficult to explain now so quickly. On the other side, with the liberation, we have less and less violence in society, and human potential unleashes. And in a way, we can, from all this knowledge, once again, from World Values Survey and the book Freedom Rising by Christian Welzel, understand all this. And I believe that, once again, this is even about another dimension.
I have not encountered that research, but it makes somewhat sense if you think of how, when difficult things come towards us, there are different kinds of defenses. And in a totalitarian environment, I can imagine that some people become rebels, and some people acquiesce, and some become just internal rebels. They don't show it outside, but they really, you know, suffer inside. There's all these possibilities are there. We see in ego development theory as well that later stages tend to be more responsible. And again, can I remind you, all of these theories describe the stages as ideals. And the way we can be in them can be very, very different. But in general, we say the later the stage, the more you are aware of the human condition, the more you're capable of really understanding that other people make meaning in different ways, not just in different levels, but also in different, fundamentally different ways. The more we feel compassion, the more we feel responsible to support human well-being. And the earlier the stage, the less that's the case. Or the way I take care of is, that's what I mentioned too, the bonds we have with other people, whom we consider to be our brother or our kinship, kindred. All of these are related words. Kind even goes into that bucket etymologically. The more we have the broader our conception of who is my brother, the more responsible we feel. And that changes. We can track it in ego development. The earliest ones, the pre-conventional, don't have any relationship to others other than in terms of exploitation. What can you do for me? What can I get from you? The first level, stage 3 or blue or whatever you call it, amber, has a relationship to those you're with, your own small circle, your family, your group, perhaps the military, certainly your religious community, and that they have the truth and you want to fit in, you want to belong. And it expands with the first post-conventional stage, 4 or 5 in our green. That's when you first discover that other people have their own stories, their own experiences, and that they are equally valid from an experiential point of view, from their own experience, they're valued. Then your range and your compassion and your tolerance for difference increases. And you see your responsibility to support those kinds of things. Does that make any sense to you?
You know what, actually, I conceptualized what I call culture of responsibility. And it is exactly what you said. But then we can also think this way, you know, somebody who is maybe 15 and cannot be at later stages of development can be already very responsible, while a person maybe who is 70 or 80 can still be immature and defiant, yes, and pretty much dysfunctional. So now with the development, with the liberation, we have societies that have, let's say, longest kind of tradition of freedom, and those also somehow they are more responsible there. And interestingly, if you observe then different indexes, then you realize that these societies are successful on all of them. There is even economically, so by GDP, then we have a social development index, which is composed of 52 categories. Then, corruption in, negative, so they have less corruption and more innovation and so on. Once again, just because, let's say, 15-year-old can be very responsible already, that's why I talk about, I described in my book, and by the way, I wanted to send you my book already some time ago, but I didn't find your address anywhere. Because if you remember, we spoke the last time when you were here, and I asked you some things. Okay, but this is our individual thing. So, by the way, I would like to send you my book, or maybe now.
May I interrupt you?
Yeah.
Because there are other people. I mean, this sounds, you can always talk to me on the internet separately.
Yeah, okay.
I would say yes, and part of what in the development goals are about is really practical teaching of young people, for instance, to be responsible. And of course, Kohlberg's work, that was almost always young people, adolescents. How can we create environments where they can take more responsibility? I'm not saying that is not possible for young people. I've always advocated that they're wise people at any level, I would say, from starting with the conventional, that it's wrong to assume that higher is always better. Yes, their influence may be smaller, it may be just a powerful influence in their own family or, their clan, but there are some really wonderful people at all stages. And we have seen that people at very late stages can be also the ones who use their cognitive complexity and their skills and their verbal skills to justify any kind of bad things they're doing. It's all self-justification, or to a large degree. That is also what we see. Narcissism can go all the way, I mean regular, not clinical, can go all the way up.
It came to the top.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I will not privatize the microphone now, so I hand it.
Thank you. I think, was there another question online, Jana? Okay. Suzanne, Peter's arrived. If you wanted to address the questions that he submitted
Peter,
online.
Which one are Peter's? I think these.
There should be, I think Tamas summarized it into 4 questions. The one you just printed.
Right. Anybody urgently needs to do something? I'm not, we're doing this sort of informally.
Are there other questions in person while we're waiting?
Complexity versus maturity arc. I'm not sure I understand the question. Even complexity is simpler, past the blue, orange, private.
I can explain.
Yes. So we have the participant, the attendees also in the room, so he will ask you directly. Yes.
Okay, very good.
Hi, Suzanne.
Are you Peter?
Hello, yes, I am, yeah.
Have we met?
We have, yeah. You appreciated my challenging of the linear nature of developmental models a few years
Yes,
ago.
I do, certainly. Challenge that still.
So what was interesting to me is you had the arc and you had the complexity on the left and you had the maturity along the right, and getting towards the midpoint, the complexity increases, and then it dips down to, as you move towards more maturity, right, according to the arc. Is that right?
I wouldn't say that complexity keeps growing.
Right.
What's no longer so attached to is the boundaries between this and that. I'm starting to realize I constructed those, and the part of all science is that we create variables and we measure things, but we can only do that by separating things into pieces we can then measure. That attachment to those boundaries goes away, slowly, stepwise, not all at once. The idea that the self I created before and I'm feeling good about, functional about, is actually an invention. When I look at myself over time, and even from moment to moment during the day, I seem to behave and be different. So even those stage measures, they're not measuring, it's almost like a time spot. Yes, people tend to behave similarly over time when we say that is your stage. You tend to make sense from stage orange or whatever, green. But we still fluctuate. We behave differently under extreme stress. The complexity increases. The complexity, look at that other image that I have with perspectives. Do you have that handy?
Yes, I do.
Because that explains it better. The complexity does increase the more I can see.
Yeah, that was my point, really, that I'm sure the complexity keeps increasing, but what seems to change is our relationship to the complexity.
That's
so
correct.
We start to see the simplicity, the other side of the complexity, right? Which means we don't experience it as so complex, but indeed the complexity keeps increasing as we transcend and include more and more as we go along.
Exactly,
yeah.
Yes, that was the message I tried to communicate yesterday. Yes. And the other image is the one with the circles, because that explains it even better. The perspective-taking one? No, not that one. That one. See where we say that the star, the self, the ego, can look back. First, it can only look in one direction, at the pre-conventional number 1. Then at 2, it can look both ways, but it's not separate. It cannot look at itself yet. Then the third perspective, that would be the expert stage, it can look back and even recognize that they are no longer part of this tight unity that is there at the blue stage, where you don't really have a separate identity yet. Now you create it. And as you go on to the fourth person perspective, it expands. Now you can look back and see what the circle that goes around. Now you can see everything that happened before. You can see how you were actually programmed to see the world in a particular way. And at the fifth perspective, you become aware of the process of meaning making, of constructing and creating stories about what is happening. And the nth perspective is there. It didn't explain that, because there are theories, particularly cognitive theories, who pride themselves of having paradigmatic and cross-paradigmatic and post-meta, post-paradigmatic cognitive capacities, and I don't deny that that's possible. It's just, to me, becomes the question of, so what? So what if we can do these mental gymnastics and you know, create theories and measurements about it? What does it serve humanity? At some point, it all becomes moot. At least, you know, you have me here, not as an expert, just who I am, how the world appears to me, and what I respond to positively, and what makes me feel unsettled. Those very, very late cognitively influenced perspectives, the nth perspective. That's also when you just can say, enough is enough. That is not about living. That it's about here, but it is not about what life is like and what for anybody. Do challenge me. I'm not not.
No, I'm fine on that question. I mean, I've got more.
There's another question inside, so maybe we can circle around.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, we can come back.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Yes.
Tatiana and I have been teaching integral course, like in Moscow. It is a 2 years long course. And we've been going through stages of ego development, some other developmental theories, but mostly ego development. And we've been spending combining it with meditation, with psychological processes, studying each stage for the whole day of a weekend workshop. So it's not 5 stages per day, it's just very in-depth work. So we found out that as we were going towards the later stages, there was an interesting process when we went to Unitive and spent the whole day at Unitive. It is a very touching experience, sorry. After this construct aware, where everybody was like, oh, our head hurts, oh, it's so depressive, so it's such a complex stage, we don't understand it. And then we go through this experience of Unitive, and we highlight, accentuate, emphasize that it is based on the empirical material. It's not idealistic conjecture, it is real people. So, sorry.
What is there a question?
I just
framing that can help all of us.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, so the question will be, so when we finished experientially diving into Unitive, everyone experienced the profound state of simplicity and bliss, and it was as if Christ consciousness was among us, this Unitive experience. So we realized that every stage has a particular experiential phenomenology when we just do it meditatively and experientially. So it was still very touching. But my question is that construct-aware stage, which precedes the unity stage, it's so complex and it's formulated in your article and other articles in such a depressive ways that Tatiana and I start to think that maybe it is not the full expression of the healthy side of this stage. Maybe like the people who got to the construct-aware and gave their samples, they gave like it is accentuated as a shadow elements, because it must be that this construct-aware stage can be not so painful and not so desperate as it seems when we work with it experientially.
That may be an artifact of when I have coached in the past, that people came to me who were confused about being at this level. I also know people who are enjoying the very tensions, the very paradoxes. It also can indeed be a positive stage, but it's hard for people to get there because there's so little support around them. I would say that. Does that make sense? It really is. So I may have overemphasized the difficulty of it. But it's also, and I think I even said yesterday, it can be liberating, freeing in the sense that now you really don't need to have any place to stand on. You can much more directly and fully respond to what is in the moment. You know when to say no much more readily than before, when you have to do all that thinking about. It does open the doors, and it opens clearly the doors to more transcendent experiences. And that in itself can be a motivator to seek more of that other different way of being. Not through the brain, but through the experience of, as you said, you used the word bliss. All of these things are helpful.
And there's also ego-aware subtype or substage, which also has a more like flowing flavor. Yes, thank you for describing.
Okay. Others? I see Jeremy. He had a list of questions.
Hello, Suzanne. Thank you very much. So the one question relates to what Duncan said earlier and to what you said in your presentation about the stage you've identified between Ken's amber and orange stages. And could that extra stage have emerged because it's near the center of the distribution, the concentrated set of data that you have? In other words, you have more data points around those three stages than you have lower down and further up on the arc. And so if that's the case, could it be that if you found another society, either with the center of gravity lower down the arc or higher up the arc, that you might in fact find from your data more intermediary stages emerging?
It could. The simple answer is really that Loewinger had that stage. She had a stage 3-4, so I wasn't going to just leave it out, since it made total sense to me, both in the manuals and in my experience in coaching, and the lots of data we have about people scoring at that level. And then the experience of what it's like to be at that level, and experience the big difference between that level and the next one. How difficult it is, from all reports of people who I have talked about would say that is the hardest, one of the hardest one to coach, because it is so sure of it's so attached to being an expert, to know something, that the idea of that there might be other ways of explaining something is just not easy to take in. And the identity is about my knowing something. And so when you critique, or let's say a performance report in a company, you get it back and they say you should be more you need to learn to be more emotionally engaged with your colleagues. That feels like you completely, they question your identity, not just a piece of what you need to improve, but the whole of you is wrong. That the self is still very fragile there. People are self-conscious in the real meaning of that word. And so it's tough to, and even somebody, I forget, yesterday asked about how Keegan stages relate to ego development. In many ways, the concept and the developmental journey is similar. But Keegan kind of mushes together 3 and 3, 4, 4 and 4, 5, where we see distinctions. The ego development is just more granular. This is a wonderful theory, but ego development gives you more details, more about the journey from one to the next.
Could I follow up on that point about the journey? One of the other questions I sent you was about the mechanism that takes people from one to the next, because in one of your articles that I read, you talk about the process, I think, of differentiation and integration. And is that the sort of driving mechanism, the sort of evolutionary impulse that underlies the movement, the journey through these different stages? And if that's so, is there a pattern, like an oscillating pattern on a spiral, from an individual-centric focus to a collective-centric focus, as we see, for example, in spiral dynamics? Have you found that in your work as well?
What we have found, and what I've even written about in my dissertation 25 years more ago, that there is a balance, but all human beings have to find a way to belong and to participate, and at the same time, certainly in the West, the individuation process, becoming a separate, unique individual, happen at the same time. There is a balancing act at each stage between the two, and there are stages that tend to be more interested, or when you broaden the time frame and the relationship frame that we talked about a bit earlier, whom you relate to, that it oscillates. For me, the stages that in ego development have the slashes, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, these are the stages that basically physically try it out. They look back and say, I'm no longer that was before. I'm now finding a new self. I'm no longer 3. I'm no longer just subsumed in the group-centric worldview. And at 4, 5 is, I now realize that I've been programmed. I'm no longer a drive, what is the spiral dynamics, drive, thrive world. I reject that. Initially we reject what we move from, then we can integrate it. At every slash level, we can also integrate the previous with what is now. But initially, people really reject, and the same is true for 5, 6. Now I reject all framings. I know they're all just invented. But then I can settle into that and say, that's wonderful, that's how life is. There is no solution. There are lots of tensions, lots of ways of looking at things, and I'm just not going to get too attached to any one story. And when I tell a story, I immediately say, oh yeah, so here we go again, and laugh at yourself for falling into that trap. And one of the things I've noticed at stage 6, there's more simplicity, and there's also a capacity to not kill the ego, which some spiritual people try to say you need to kill it, you need to see its function and have a good laugh at its efforts that it's making all the time, constantly trying to be in charge, constantly trying to make sure that you feel important, and all of those things we humans do. And you can smile at it. You can basically say, here you go, really, here you go again. Let go.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Compared to the universe, we are just such a tiny drop in the ocean. And yet, as individuals, we are important. We do make an impact on the environment. And that's, oh, I see somebody I think I know about because of the red hair. Didn't we have a course together? Yes. Nice to see you again.
Did you want to say
So
something?
that would be my response to that.
So now I have the mic. Great to see you.
Nice to see you.
I'm curious about, you mentioned about in the beginning that maybe you may share some things about your new book. Would you mind?
I might at the end if
At the
people,
end. Okay.
so people can leave if they don't want Q&A. I might say something about, if I can even figure it out, how to show you. And I thought I could read you a little bit of the beginning of the guide to the fable. But only if people are interested towards the end.
I am, at least. Thank you.
Suzanne, I had another question, if I may. I think in the pre-conference you were talking about the stages and things like uplift and fallback and regression.
Yes.
And I'm curious, I help run a meditation center integral community where we have a 3-month immersive program. And I would say a number of people come in, let's say at stage 4, and they sort of have an uplift to 4/5, if I'm understanding. And then when they leave, it's we try to sort of have an integrated process, but there's very often see fallback and then regression. And I was curious if you found approaches that really help, if it's kind of a temporary uplift like that, what helps keep that going?
Usually having a community, a sangha, to continue at the level they were, that's one of the ones. I'm in a Zen sangha that I've been to since 6 years or something. And we meet once a month to keep that kind of being alive. Because it is so true when we come to a wonderful retreat, we have these blissful and uplifting experiences. And then you go back into the world, the working world, where that is not appreciated. And so the pressure to then conform again to what the going thing is just very, very high.
Right.
And
Thank
so
you.
that's the best thing I can offer. Have the people after your workshops create small groups of ongoing supporting each other in this newer way of looking at things.
Great, thank you. And I guess a part B of that question is your research showing, I guess, which methodologies are really working and being effective?
It depends also on the personality of the person who is doing the helping. Because, you know, Bina Sharma, she's been a long-time collaborator with me and we taught together. She prefers polarity management. She's really a wizard at it, I have to say. But my natural inclination is more clean language, if you've heard of that, where you actually look only at how the person, him or herself, makes meaning of things, what metaphors they use, how they envision obstacles, for instance. That to me is more, in my style, I can use both, and I do, but each of us has a preference. And it's good to know what your particular strengths are and preferences as a coach or, in your fields, therapist.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions in the room? Do you want to come forward? So it might be easier for them to put the camera.
Hello, Suzanne. My name is Shara. Lovely to be here with you.
Where are you from?
I am from New Mexico and California. So,
Okay.
Yeah. I really loved the Ark because I saw it as an antidote to the kind of egoic drive to achieve. And I also saw it as almost like as we develop, we go up and then down in the glamorousness. Like I almost see it as, and I feel that's helpful. So I want to tell a story, and I'm kind of curious what you think of it, because for me as a psychotherapist and a minister, we say we want to develop, but we really don't, because what makes us develop is usually very painful. It's not asked for. It's confusing. It brings us in the wilderness. So we don't really we want the fruits, but we don't really want to get there. And we're not even in charge. So it's such a paradox. So I was a student of the Living School with Jim Finley years ago, and he's a beautiful teacher. He's very kind of mystical. And the person that I was a roommate with was his devotee. And he starts talking about how he can't sleep at night, and he sleeps naked, and he's in his 80s, and he gets up and he just walks around the house for hours. But his wife was getting concerned about him. So she said, okay, you have to start walking with your cane. So he's like, that's what I do. I wake up at 3 in the morning, and for a couple of hours, I just walk around naked in my house with a cane. And afterwards, my roommate was really upset. And I asked her why, and she said, Shara, I love Jim Finley, and I've always wanted to be like him, but I don't want to be like that. And it really struck me, that if we really had role models of what construct-aware and unitive consciousness looks like, it might temper our ego to want to get there, because it's expansive, but it is not glamorous. You know, a colleague I know who I do believe is construct-aware unitive, he just wants to go to India and sit and watch these beautiful school where children who wouldn't get educated. And he just sits there for hours. And then he has to come back to the States for his visa, and then he just wants to go back. It's like the lifestyle is beautiful, but it's not something those of us still in our ego really want to strive for. So I think that might help temper the narcissism that makes us want to continue to grow and maybe just trust the process a bit more.
And you think the Ark?
I think the Ark helps
more
that.
Of an idea,
I think the Ark helps that because it almost shows, you almost have a peak of cultural relevance and glamour.
That's the idea,
and then
yes.
As you grow, you will get more expansive, but your cultural relevance and glamorousness is going to fade away.
Yes, and that's what we're saying about narcissism is everywhere. But that's what the ego is. Yeah. It's an attachment to its own power, insights, in its own fabulosity. I know that word. And it's okay. That's what we all couldn't grow. We couldn't develop if we didn't have a self of, certainly in the West. I'm not familiar enough in detail. I've never lived in an indigenous culture and seen children grow up. So I can't say about that. My sense is it would be different. And so here we have egos, and we get, you get supported, you get flattered, you get all the things that make us feel good. We achieve things. Achievement is wonderful. If you have, any one of you there, you must have things where you feel both good about being an expert in something, feel good about what you have achieved through your efforts, and that gets rewarded, certainly financially. in our culture, in the sort of modern Western culture, that gets rewarded, achievement. And then you learn that there is something more than just that it's in some fundamental way unsatisfactory. And then you may engage in ways of out of your inner motivation to do something else, to search for something different. And again, that's a transition from the high point of our cultural support to the other side. I actually sent Lily a more complex picture. Do you have that of the ark?
Yes, it's...
Maybe we can look at that.
Thank you.
It is, I'm sharing it. Can you see it? Okay.
If not, we can still look at that. The other one has a bit more detail in it.
Okay. Sorry.
All right, let's not get stalled here because of the picture. We can look at this one.
Is this the slide that you meant to show, Susan?
No, it had more. It's the same slide, except it has more information on it.
I see.
The one I sent you this morning.
Yes, so you sent me 2 slides. This is one of them, and then the second one.
Oh, that's the bottom one. Yes, the bottom has more information, the second one.
Okay, is this the one?
Yes, okay. I forgot there were 2 slides because the stuff didn't fit on the one slide. So the whole idea from growing from education, our legal system, everything has to do about knowledge, the rational linear reasoning, the program that kind of becoming an adult, the stage 4 adult, is supported by society. And what we're trying to develop is a separate, unique, separate self that's clear of who they are. And people at this stage are usually quite self-assured in the sense of knowing who they are. They've already done, you know, all kinds of testing, and they know their traits. They may have done an MBTI, and they have a sense of who they are. And I can't see the rest. It's okay. Do you have questions about the other pieces underneath it, on the text?
Do you have any other questions?
And then
Yes.
there is this huge shift towards realizing that much of what one has known is programmed.
Hello.
We have been brainwashed, if you want a really strong word for that.
We have another question in the room here, Suzanne, Tatiana.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi, nice meeting you.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I will ask in Russian, and Женя will help me with translation. Некоторые психотипы с самого детства изучают, осваивают реальность на русском языке, а какие-то
There are different types, like psychotypes, and some psychological types study reality based in language, and other types study reality based in embodiment.
And the question is?
I'm continuing translating. There's a longer question.
Oh, okay, it's coming.
Yeah, so they focus on actions and on sensory activities instead of language and abstract concepts. And at early age, some people belong to the type which is more linguistic, but other children are clearly more sensory body emphasis in their knowledge of the world while they're at the same stage. So when people of this sensory type, it's like in MBTI, for instance, it is a sense, MBTI indicator, it is a sensory type. When they get to later stages, and while they still remain not linguistically oriented, they still remain body oriented and action oriented, will sentence completion test measure them and adequately recognize them? Mm-hmm. Because they were not developing their verbal linguistic line of development, they will be speaking in very simple terms, while they could be very advanced in terms of other ways of embodiment.
That's certainly one concern. Again, that's way back, Lovinger said, linguistic verbal capacity. So yes, there may be other ways, again, like indigenous, there may be other ways of how people become highly sophisticated that are not particularly verbally gifted or capable or trained. I mean, going to school, postgraduate, you know, if you go to later educational institutions, part of what you learn there is language. And that is now sometimes, as I mentioned also yesterday, it becomes harder and harder to distinguish what is genuine experience and what is actually taken over and repeated, but is not internalized, is not embodied knowledge. I totally agree, and I'm certainly not an expert in child development in the area you seem to know, because I've studied development of children only in terms of their language acquisition.
But for the adults who are, for instance, so-called second-tier stages, they still remain sensory types, but they could be, you know, will the sentence completion test recognize them as this later stage for construct-aware or something or not?
If they're verbally able to express some of what their sensory experiences are, if they say, I actually don't do it this way. What means more to me is how I feel about it, or what I sense about another human being. That would be picked up. But they need to be able to reflect, to be able to express it. If they don't, then yes, then the sentence completion tests are the wrong measure. And I find that with some of the people who have now adopted sentence completion tests and claim they can measure way beyond unitive, that they, I don't know what they measure, but I don't think that, I just simply don't feel sentence completion tests are the right measure for that. There are other measures that get more at the transpersonal kinds of insights than sentence completion tests. But there are just opinion differences.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, there's lots more questions coming in the room here. Suzanne. Sure. And then we'll go back to you.
Hey, Suzanne. Peter here again. Just
Hi, Peter.
Hello. Just to build on that last point, again, a story of being in a workshop with Don, where
Yes.
I think we were probably Spiral Dynamics 2 or something, and he was sitting there going through it, and I just had this insight, and I said to him, Don, would you agree that spiral dynamics as a way of thinking essentially comes out of yellow? And he would kind of thought for a minute, and he said, yeah, it's basically a yellow way of kind of making sense of the world, because it's all about putting the bits and pieces together and having the helicopter view and all of that kind of thing. And so I then said, so would you agree that by your definitions of your own model, that as we move beyond yellow, spiral dynamics is no longer an adequate model for explaining reality. And he paused for a minute, and then he just said, Mary, I like the way you think. So that kind of reinforces your point, you know. These models come out of one of the very levels that they describe. And once we push beyond it, this whole concept of linear development and levels may no longer be an adequate way of describing reality.
So it's always important for any kind of measure and theory to see where it actually applies and where its limits are.
Yeah. Can I come back to the midpoint, this question of the system in the middle, you know, between blue and orange? Yeah. So just to back that up really with some research that we did, it was embodied research with dancers and a very good choreographer and dancer himself, a guy called Dylan Newcomb. And he had dancers make different, like 8 different vowel sounds and see what their bodies did when they made those vowel sounds. And then he added an in and out breath, so they got to 16 archetypal movements. And he then had them go through the spiral and look at which movements applied best reflected the energies of the different value systems. Right? And what they found was fascinating, because they said after you get to blue, and then when he got to orange, it was like the rest of the spiral, and we took it as a set of 8, right? So we took it as an octave. Mirrored, the top half mirrored the bottom half. So it was like orange became a subtle form of blue in a way, and a form that was conscious of blue. And then green became a kind of subtle reflection of red, and yellow became a subtle reflection of purple, and turquoise became a subtle reflection of beige, just in terms of the physical movements and how the dancers experienced it. So that would, I think, build on the idea of it from the moment of blue onwards, you're kind of consciously integrating the pre-midpoint stages, if you see what I mean. So there's that self-aware moment at the midpoint that would kind of reflect what you're saying about there being a real key fulcrum at the middle between in spiral blue and orange.
Yes, and again, it depends a bit on what we focus on. If you used this fascinating research with doing sounds and dances, that there may be similarities that make sense. And we know from Ken's work, you know, transcend and include. You don't lose what you had before. And there are resonances. As I said, with the differentiation stages, each time there is a new way of saying, I'm no longer that, I'm now a new way of looking at the world. And that's a pattern that goes all the way through. There are many such patterns that we can find, and yours is a fascinating one with dances and sound.
Well, it's very interesting because if you think of yellow trying to integrate purple, have you noticed how many people getting into integral start getting into shamanism as well? Right, there's quite a few.
That's also, sure, and it's also part of the broader interest in other ways of making meaning that emerges at yellow.
And people getting into energetics, more from the turquoise, start to do a lot more embodiment work, which is like beige. Because if you're going to work with energy, you've got to be in your body, but you start to realize otherwise you lose it. So there's some very interesting echoes that would suggest there's a midpoint at exactly that blue-orange transition that you're pointing to.
Okay, yes, thank you. I haven't read about it. If you write about it, I'll be interested. Okay?
Hello, David here again. Now, I would like to ask you, what about Buddhist monks? Some of them are at very late stages of development, but to be honest, I'm a bit puzzled. Where are they?
It totally depends on many, many other criteria. I have some research between Christian nuns it's an old sample, it was in the late or early 90s, so I have forgotten the detail, but there were three different religious communities that were studied. And again, within the community, there was a broad range. Interestingly enough, the Christian nun community was the earliest overall of the three samples. But that could have been because people who are particularly these days, who are attracted to the monkish life, and I apologize if I used the wrong descriptors, tend to be the ones who seek a community where things are settled, where we know what we do when we get that. That seemed the best explanations we could have for the differences. The other communities were a bit broader. And I've done research with gurus, and what's interesting about ego development testing is that the later the stage, the fewer responses you actually need to be rated there. You have to give a signal that you can make meaning at these later stages. You don't have to have them across the board. That's, by the way, another giveaway when people try too hard. Because if it's a better sign of maturity if you have a broad range than if you just have all post-conventional, high-level, what I sometimes say, highfalutin stuff. The people who try to rate high will try to give you as many post-conventional responses as possible. And so we look for a broader distribution. And I've had one guru anyway who had, overall I think he was blue, but he had 6 or so responses at the other end of the spectrum that to me said this person knows, and he's just living an ordinary life. He doesn't need to put all this fancy stuff into his words. Life is relatively simple, but he did have access to very late stage meaning making in a few places.
Thank you.
Hi, Suzanne. The conservative backlash we've been going through in the States, and also like in France and other places in the world, do you sense that the conservatives can feel a world culture developing and they're afraid of it?
Yes, because as soon as you make that transition from I know what's what, and this is how life is, and this is how other human, it is a challenge to be open. It's safer to not be. I see somebody I recognize next to you. Hello. I'm so puzzled of what's happening. I'm so at a loss of even struggling to have that much empathy for some of the stuff that's going on. I try, but it's hard. All I want to do is, you know what? Stifle their voices.
So maybe it's a good sign that it's kind of gasping, it's laugh. It's almost like a death rattle of an era changing. And it's not going to stop it, I don't think. Because what struck me is being here 2 weeks early, it's already happening. World culture is happening. English is the predominant language everywhere we go.
Yes.
I've been thanking people all week for speaking English. So.
And I also see the other side. You know, I'm not a native speaker, and I feel perfectly at ease, so most of the time. It is monopolizing, it is making everything level, the same. And we lose all the beautiful, that's another thing about indigenous languages that get lost. We lose some of the human spirit that is embedded in those ways of talking differently. It all becomes leveled towards the English, which is a peculiar language when you think about it. It's awfully linear. You can have here a subject and then a verb, and then it's all, you can't play around with it. Even German is much more flexible. And I've tried twice in my life to learn a non-Indo-European language. First it was Turkish. No, now it's Turkish, and then before it was Hungarian. And I totally failed at it, even when I was young, because my brain simply is not set up to follow the ways that these other languages make meaning of it. The words, the sequences, the connections that are in the grammar, they're just so different. I couldn't. So that to me tells me a sad thing again. Yes, it's wonderful. We can talk to each other. Just see how many different countries and native languages we have in this small group. And we lose a lot as well. As humanity, as what people have figured out over hundreds and thousands of years.
Suzanne, if I may ask another question. In your presentation yesterday, you commented on how some of the models like AQAL and spiral dynamics have equated social stages with individual stages, and you've questioned that. Would you say it's perhaps more difficult to measure or find evidence for social stages than for individual stages? And should we be questioning even more the models of stages of cultural evolution?
Again, I have so much focus just on the individual that what I know about testing for social is far less sophisticated. I know I know a good system that actually comes out of spiral dynamics that has a social, let me think, what's his name? His last name is Cook, C-O-O-K-E. You can look it up. He has a fairly sophisticated model for testing for cultural differences. And I think now that the IDGs are doing that and others are looking at it, there is more about it, but I'm personally not informed enough to know how good these measures are and what they find. I think so far what we have is more measures about organizational cultures. And again, mostly Western-oriented ones, because that's where the money is being the capitalistic sort of foundation of commerce. And so I'm not sure, but it's an interesting question. How could we distinguish? And the pattern that Gebser and with, by the way, Swiss, and I'm always a little proud of Piaget and all of those other big names being Swiss. Jung and a whole bunch of them, and people who have worked in this field. So I'm standing on big shoulders. It's interesting question that you raise. How would we figure that out? My sense is that it's not identical. And when both Dawn and Ken made the decision to parallel the things, that was a misstep, because since then, that whole idea has been debunked. That that it's so linearly, one to the next to the next. There's certainly indications of it we can see, but not as clear as it seemed to be in the original use of these ideas.
At one level, if you're going to measure a culture or a community, a society, you have to build it up from the micro level of individuals through the tests, right? You have to go and ask individuals a bunch of questions and then somehow aggregate those scores to give you some sense of the center of gravity for a community, right? But that's probably even more difficult than finding a center of gravity for an individual person.
I have certainly some experience working with organizations where you can clearly have stage 4 organizations. Control, command, hierarchical, all of that. And a few that I've met, especially one I've worked with for quite a number of years, that was more green. That was really created around developing people, where the bottom line was not just how much money can we make, but how can we raise people's capacities in all kinds of ways. Only to have happen and that we did test the leadership team, and it did look like it was a bit later than the other ones that I've seen. So that when you look overall, you can say, yeah, there is enough post-conventional people in this group to give us a sense why this is working as a more greenish, flat culture that values human development, not just the bottom line. But then in this particular case, a new CEO came in, and we went right back to survival mode and stage 4-ish kinds of perfectly adequate and meaningful move, but a bit the sad one. Because once you have to survive in the economy we are in now, that is a big thing. How do you survive? Then these kinds of things can be lost. I always wonder what Lalus, if he did the research with the company he did again, whether that would still be showing up the way it did when he wrote his book. It's hard to maintain later stage groups. That would be my response.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Suzanne, I wanted to ask, this goes back to Tom's first question about the data correlation set. I understand there's some inclusive questions about the data, but sorry if I missed this in your presentation yesterday with jet lag, but what do you make of it? What do you make of those? Where did all the stage 6 people go?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
That data correlation that had the 4 data sets over the 11,000, what do you interpret from that? Do you have a conclusion?
Simply that we have enough evidence that there is definitely a stage between 3 and 4 in individual development. And if you think of it, of any kind of statistics, it's clearly a curve with the tails being very thin, partially because fewer people get there and fewer people take a test who are very, very early. And partially because, to me, it just never, from the beginning, when I first met Ken and Dawn, it never made sense that where they're the most people, 75% in aggregate there, in the conventional stage, that we only would have 2 differentiations. And then lots of stages, 3 or 4 before and after. It just didn't compute to me. Naturally, the more people you have in a distribution, the more likely you can find distinctions in the largest group. That would be my explanation why. And Lavinger had that stage, I have to say. So It was a priori, I assumed it was there.
Okay, I see. Thank you. Other questions in the room?
Yes, Peter.
Me again. I just build on one of the comments you made yesterday, which was about how the complexity of the Graves model gets a little lost when you collapse his double helix model into a single color, right? Because Graves originally had 2 letters for each value system.
That I like. That made more sense to me.
One represented life conditions and one represents the value system, because the value system is the coping mechanism for dealing with the life conditions. So it doesn't just arise, it arises because we need to deal with a certain level of complexity. And therefore, as Don always said, it's not about moving up the spiral, that's not the mission. The mission is fitness between value system stroke coping mechanism and the life conditions. So your job as a spiral wizard is to make sure that the life conditions are aligned with the coping mechanism. That's the key. It's not all about getting to yellow or turquoise. It's about that fitness across the life conditions and the value system. And I think that's really important related to this question about can you assess collectives, right, like a society. So I've been training ChatGPT in how to do an analysis of countries based on spiral dynamics. And what it's been doing, it's been crunching through life conditions data. So like World Bank reports, OECD reports, UN reports on all different kind of facets of a society. And it's then been comparing what it finds to the key descriptions in spiral dynamics and coming up with what it feels the level of influence is of each value system based on the life conditions that it sees in these different countries. And it's quite fascinating. So the first thing I've done is got 30 countries in analysis. And by the way, if anybody would like to look at an analysis of their country, I'd really appreciate the feedback in terms of whether you feel it's accurate or not. But just to emphasize that point of don't lose track of key piece, which is the life conditions side. Because that's what triggers the emergence of the value system. They don't arise in a vacuum. They arise in the context of the life conditions. And an analysis of the life conditions can actually help us understand which value systems are likely to be present in a culture or society because they're having to cope with those life conditions.
I couldn't agree with you more. We say the same thing, as I remember the different forms of how people move. Integration is the most important one to us, not whether you move up or down or whatever. How can you find a place where the fit with your environment is positive? I think that I'm glad you did the research on whole countries. That would be fascinating to see. I would indeed be curious how the Swiss come out. They're usually left out because we're not in all these big research models because the Swiss have not joined the EU yet. And so they don't get tested. When I was early on when I did sentence completion tests, I did a sample in Switzerland because my hunch was that overall the culture, because it has such a profoundly good educational system, might score a little higher than the rest. And indeed it did. I can't see you anymore, it's all black. And it's harder for me to talk to a black screen. Is Lily there?
Yeah, just a second, Suzanne, we're just getting the tech people are just fixing it.
Anyway, the answer I had, it's just because they have been brainwashed to be more the way, a little bit more post-conventional. It's just part of the society. It's part of, as you say, it's part of what is being fostered for everybody from childhood on. But that I didn't feel, when I met people and worked with them, I didn't feel they were actually as post-conventional as the test might have shown. So there's caution there as well.
Okay, another question in the room, Suzanne.
Hi, Susanne.
Hi.
Drawing upon your last comment here, I come from Denmark, which is measured to be greenish, one of the most greenish countries in the world. And what I experience myself in Denmark is that the green values somehow become a blue foundation.
Yes.
So what seems to be green is actually a new blue foundation that on the surface seems to be a higher level, but underneath is actually on the blue level.
And how we explain that in eco-development, it is not what you say, it's not the content, which may be greenish, what people that, but the structure, how you hold that value. And you're saying to me you experience that it's more held, like people at blue hold their values. And that was the same experience I had in Switzerland.
Okay.
What seems more advanced is actually held in a way that is still very dogmatic, if you will.
Yeah. Thank you.
So when you look at people's development, look at how attached they are to their view and their values, not so much what the values per se are. And I tried to explain it yesterday quickly with the values, that you can have positive values like loving animals, caring for animals, but have them look very different what you then do with that. You love at different levels.
And do you see that correlates with wokeism?
With what?
Wokeism.
Well, probably. Could be, yes. And with all the other things that people are so tightly attached to, ideas about the world. And one other thing we know from economic studies is, what's it called? Not the traditional ones, the newer ones. That attachment to what we already have, attachment to a theory that I really, really love, and then realizing that I've been barking up the wrong tree, that there's actually something, is one of the hardest things to let go of. If we invest so much of our beautiful energy into a theory, into a belief, into whatever it is, then letting go is just tough across the board. Whether that be a financial investment in something that doesn't pan out, it is hard for human beings to acknowledge that we have made a mistake in that sense, where we invested perhaps so much of our energy into having it, explaining things to us, making us rich, whatever. It's an investment, how shall we say that shortly? It's a reluctance to acknowledge investments we have made in things that don't seem to work out in years. I think that's part of the argument that integral and spiral dynamic, fine, they serve a lot of functions, good functions, and they may probably not include this stage, the 3-4 stage, in the long run. And that's okay. Because for the good, on balance, for what the good they do. Anybody else?
Yes, we have
Are we
one
out
more
of
question.
questions?
Yes, one more question.
Hi, Susanne.
Hi.
I'm interested about if you have made comparisons between the results of women and men. Because I come
Interest me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I come from Finland.
We have.
Yeah, I come from Finland, and we have, I think, like an increasing gap between the values of women and men. So,
and that is generally so. Some of you may know Gilligan's work way back, sort of confronting Kohlberg's idea of sort of the more male model of, how to be, and women who are more caring, more interested in general. That's still true across the world, with few exceptions in indigenous cultures, but in general that's still the case. And what we have found, which has always surprised me, there's a bigger difference in the conventional stages, and as people develop, they become more similar to each other. So late stage meaning makers, sometimes it's hard to tell whether it's a woman or a man saying it, where it's quite easy to figure out in the earlier stages. Because also what people then critique in the other, the resistance, the pushback they have about male hierarchical behavior, for instance. They will say so on the test. And then you can, this is a woman speaking here. So your hunch is right. There are differences. And they seem to go away as people develop. They become less clear. And it's also, again, societal, because men are being brainwashed to be a certain way, the macho way. We just know those differences. And women are, because they're generally quieter, that's also true with the very early stages. I just wrote recently about the opportunist, the pre-conventional stage, how we know only what men do at that level, because women hide, because they are the victims of power and the abuse and all of that. So that we don't have much evidence for them other than they seem to be hiding to be safe. And men, of course, act out their power with no problem whatsoever, as we see now in our country. Early development has no compunction doing that, but women are not being seen. And you may have different experiences. Again, it's what you get here is my personal experience, not wisdom in the sense of I understand.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have another question from Tatiana.
Hello.
Hello, Tatiana.
Will helps me again.
So
why don't you speak so I can hear the Russian too? That's a pleasure.
Okay. Мой вопрос
He can still translate.
Мой вопрос связан с тем, производилось ли какое-то осмысление с позиции вертикального развития, корреляции между тем, как проявляется одна и та же стадия у людей разного возраста, например, в 25 и в 60 лет, потому что ведь это разная социальная роль, разный жизненный опыт, хотя стадия одинаковая.
So my question is, in terms of vertical adult development, has there been a study, for instance, the same stage, any stage, at different ages, like at the age of 25 or at the age of 60 or 70? So there are different social roles, and Tanya also mentioned when we discussed her grandmother, who is obviously not green stage, but she's more conventional, but she has such a wisdom coming towards the peak of her life. Like she is very, how old is she? She's about 77, so how is it incorporated in the model of development, that there is stage and there are ages, and how stages manifest, the similar one stage manifests at different age?
What I can say is that we know there is no huge correlation between age and stage in general. However, life experience can have different effects. For instance, I grew up with what I would call a wise grandmother. She was definitely conventional in every which way, early conventional. But the way she held herself, the way she taught us, the way she was hugely influential and wise. So that is always possible. As I said earlier, at any stage you can have people who way of being that influences others in a best of ways. And later stages not necessarily wise. There's often it's just capable of more cognitive, complexity, but not wiser. Not more compassionate, not more able to discern what the right action is in a moment. One of the hardest things I'm learning right now is to learn to say no more often. Because that it's just not me. But as you get older, really older, that is one of the challenges, to have to learn to say no. I can't do this anymore. I have to let it go. Including coming to the conference. I really would have loved to come. But here we are, we're together in this format.
Thank you. Again, this is Zerrin. I want to ask an as-if question, if I may.
Sure.
To you. Just suppose, with all the knowledge and experience you have, you are to start a program for children, child development. What might be a few key things that you would really love to see in that?
That we don't do just the 3 R's. That we really let children learn also through dance, through singing, through music, through art, all the different ways human beings can grow. And not just, and then passing tests, whether you can spell right or all of that, those kinds of things. Far more a whole human kind of education. There are plenty of models out there, and already schools that actually do that. So if you want to create something like that, I would look around for it. Some of it would be like Waldorf schools, Montessori schools. There are many models out there already. Please do. Children deserve a much broader way of appreciation and learning than the ones we have in so many places.
Any more questions?
I have a question, Duncan.
Oh, Lily has a question.
Yes,
you don't need the mic.
Yes, Suzanne, I have a question, yes. I'm not familiar with spiral dynamic theory. Could you please tell me the sample size of the original study?
Of spiral dynamics?
Yes.
I don't know. I think it started out, I'm not even sure, more in the organizational context. And I really don't know their data sets.
Thank you, Suzanne.
And once you have a system in place and you have tests in place, then of course people fit the test. That's one of the advantages of ego development theory. Came out of data, not out of a theory that pre-existed. which is part of its strengths.
Yeah.
I remember having an argument with Don about fallback. He kind of explained that when you go back, you behave, let's say, red, then you're red. And I always said that it depends on the consciousness you have for your behavior, not your behavior per se. You can be at a later stage and recognize that right now I'm behaving like, like an ugly word. I can't think of one that's proper in this context. But you know it, you don't forget it. Whereas regression is you really are going back to the stage you behave at. You can no longer think or feel or have consciousness of the state you came from. To me, that's a big difference, and Don just didn't see it.
Yeah.
But I've had arguments with anybody really. I don't take it as I'm right or they're wrong. It's just interestingly different, looking at things differently.
Yeah.
To me, where your consciousness is, that's the structural aspect, is more important than the content.
Yes.
Or just the behavior, the outside behavior that others can see.
Yeah.
How do you hold?
Yeah. And I wonder, for Peter, you mentioned that you were a close friend of Don Beck, and you were very familiar with the theory. And may I ask if you knew the original study, like the sample size, the context, and can you help me with that as well?
The first original study was Peter. Wasn't that a very, very small and biased sample? Students and professors, basically. Graves' first study, and he made a beautiful paper out of it.
Yeah, so it was Claire Graves. Yeah, was the original.
Yeah.
Was the original work, not Don and
Not
Chris.
Don's.
They took it. I don't know. Saeed would probably be the best person, maybe, to answer the question about the details of that study. But you can probably find it actually online. And Chris Cowan and Natasha published one of Graves' early writings, didn't they?
Yes.
The Never-Ending Quest. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So the information, I think, would be in that. For me, it's a question of when I bring it into organizations or societal context, does the map help people understand their reality and make sense of what's happening? And if it does, and then the solutions that come out of that help them solve something, for me, it's like, I'm very practical. My father's a mechanical engineer, my mother's a Quaker and a children's nurse. So I have both the vision but the practicality. And if it works, then it's useful to me. So I'm not so much in the theory side, but the application.
And in the end, I would say, and as an older person, indeed, it's so tough to be an adult. Anywhere, for anybody, in any life circumstance, that when we find something that we can use as a help, as a guide, as a framework, the better for the person. Even if later one might have to change, but to have something to hold on to is in itself a valuable thing.
Great, and I think Jeremy had a thought on Lily's question as well.
Yes, just from the little I know about spiral dynamics and having taken a couple of their courses, in addition to Claire Graves' original work, which I should say some people like Dr. Rika Fullion, who will be here, I think, tomorrow, are re-looking at the Graves data because they went and found the archives. And so they're reprocessing some of his original data. That's one thing. And then, as far as I know, Don Beck had a National Values Center where he was collecting a lot of data based on questionnaires, the survey with a list of values. I've completed one of those assessments, for example, so I know kind of what it looks like. To what extent that instrument has been used in other parts of the world, I don't know, but Rika will be a very good person to ask when she comes tomorrow.
I took the test, of course, as well, since I took several of Ton's classes, and the whole group there, everybody was yellow. That made it a little bit suspicious to me. Because the way values are framed, of course, naturally, it's a self-selecting process. If you have to choose between good and evil, which one are you going to choose on a test? I mean, exaggerating. So that test, at least the values test, they may have very different things. That's 30 years ago. That was not a very good test because it was so simple and so is it this or that kind of thing. Like many tests that have value pairs. Of course, naturally we choose the ones that make the ego makes it looks better and that we know will be rated better. Yes.
Suzanne, I have a question. There is this developmental studies based in Harvard, and there is Lectica assessment tools. What have you looked into them? What could you say professionally about this system, Lectica assessment?
It has actually changed very recently, as far as I can tell, and is now really far, far more based on Fisher's skill theory. And in that sense, it is actually, it is very linear, of course, and it tries to build, you know, stepwise on an inner skill. But it is well done. I just don't think it can measure ego development, for instance. It doesn't even have a definition of what an ego is or what the self is. But in teaching children, for instance, stepwise, very small, with scaffolding the learning, it's a learning theory now. I really think it's good. I didn't think it was so fabulous when it was more about the other kinds of development. And it was always, and I've told you already, I've been sort of challenging conversations with Theo. I once listened to her presentation and I asked her at the end, what about, it's all about. You're asking people, how do you think or feel or react about this dilemma? It's what I call aboutism. How can you get the true behind it? And she was very upset about my using that word. And that's where the conversation stopped. Mm-hmm. But you see, that's again a difference between aboutism. One can know a lot about all sorts of things, but how well are they integrated? How well are they actually part of your being? And how much are they what you can talk about?
Спасибо.
You're welcome.
So
yes.
I don't disagree with Peter that spiral dynamics has done people some good in terms of growth. But I've always thought as philosophy is the intermediary between science and mythology. And if construct validity doesn't matter to us, then why aren't we just another mythology?
Well, that's what E.O. Wilson has said, and that's one of the later stage recognitions, is that all these theories are a kind of mythology. They're invented. And the question is only how useful are they to individuals? We just mentioned that before. Sometimes I feel it's so hard to function if you find a theory, not a primitive one or conspirational type, but a theory that explains things to you and makes you function better in your environment, then so be it. I used to be so against, what's it called? When you believe in star charts. What's the word?
Astrology.
Yes. And now I'm not so sure anymore. That's maybe something that grows too, your sureness of what you like and don't like. because I've done 3 rounds of it. One with an American psychoanalyst, one with a South African shaman, and one with a South American shaman. And guess what? They were so similar, and they pegged me so well in some ways that I had to say there is more to this than meets the rational, skeptical mind.
Wow, I feel like Caesar, and I want to go A2 Brutus, A2 Caesar.
Of course. And again, maybe that has something to the softening of uncertainties is certainly something that could grow also with just wisdom and regardless of age. Just life experience softens, can soften, and it can harden. Both, but the softening is the one that's intriguing to me.
Another question in the room, Suzanne. I'll just take the mic over.
Hi, Suzanne. My name's Heidi.
Hi, Heidi. Where are you from?
From South Africa.
Okay.
I was really struck by yesterday when you shared the graph of the 4 map samples of the stages of development and spoke a lot about, the missing stage, but sort of looking at where the aggregate seemed to sit in the 3, 4, 5. And the comment that you made is that you don't think people have evolved much. And I'm just...
Maybe that's a response to what's happening in this country right now.
Yeah. And I guess...
And it's not fair.
But I think, I feel, I really resonated with the emotional texture behind when you said that yesterday. So I'm just curious about, with all the years of work that you've done in this field, what are the things that if you really dream into, where you see signs of hope, the questions that are being asked through the research and the way this work's been applied, what is your own source of hope and what are you dreaming into now on the back of all your research and all your wisdom?
I wonder, it's a true reality that we have gone a different way. Humanity is veering off with artificial intelligence and all those things into a direction where I have no clue what is going to happen to my grandchildren, for instance, and the children across the world, what world they will live in. And I have no predictions how they will be able to cope. Future prediction is getting so hard. I do think we should use AI for certain things, including testing, because you can do much broader samples much more quickly. But I don't know. I guess I'm not very hopeful, actually, personally, and that's a personal thing as well. That may nothing have to do with the larger world. I don't see many signs. I see many signs of hopeful ways of, saying it's just a growth thing. It goes down. We will disintegrate, and then we will start with the new integration and the new human being. But I just can't know. The not knowing is really the place where I most often end up in all of these kinds of things. I'm not sure. I just can't know. And I don't know how we would and how others can know. And then it comes back to one's personality. But if you're hopeful, I'm ever so glad for you.
I'm getting some reminders about the book and story. Suzanne, is there any other questions? We're in our last 20 minutes, last 15 minutes.
If you are happy, I can show you or read a little bit about it. So I have written with an Australian colleague who is half my age and the CEO of Street University, which deals with delinquent kids, youngsters all over Australia. Really fantastic outfit. But anyway, we have written a fable together that happens around Walden Pond, because I live 5 minutes from this famous pond here in the United States, where Henry Thoreau and some other famous people lived and wrote. Does anybody among you know this? Walden, the famous book? Anyway, the fable happens around there. It happens just physically to have 7 sort of promontories around the lake. And we have animals representing the stages. There is a visitor from Australia, an otter. And he is about stage 4 or 5. He's sort of an everybody, an everyman. And there is a resident old owl that has been there and created a community with these very different people. And so when the otter visits Walden, like any other tourist, tourists come by the busloads to this place because it is famous. Then the owl sees him and asks him whether he would like to stay for a week and learn about the community, not just about the physicality of the place. And after some, there's all kinds of adventures, and dangerous ones and beautiful ones, and a love story, and etc. But the author agrees. And so the story different stages. Then we wrote a companion book that explains the scenes in more of a more theoretical way, but with very simple language that even a child can read. So my colleague's 12-year-old daughter read it, the early chapters, and said, "Oh my God, now I know why I don't fit in the classroom she was in, because the rest of the kids were still blue, they were still group-centric, and she had already moved on and just didn't fit and felt bad about not fitting. And once she read the story, she felt fine. Ah, yes, I know who I am and why I am the way I am." And at the same time, I'm also finally writing, I hope I can finish in my lifetime, the book on ego development, the theoretical book, which I'm also now having learned to use much simpler language than, for instance, my 9 levels paper that so many people know. I now shudder at the style, the academic style. It's not necessary to communicate. But, so that has given me a lot of joy, because I'm also drawing all the characters. I can show you one thing. It's handy here. Where is it? Here. This is a fake copy of the book, of the fable, with a sketch of mine. It's not even a finished drawing. It was just a sketch. And that has just given me so much joy to look at every animal. I've always been an animal lover. That's why I chose that also as an example. But when I was young, I wanted to become a zoologist or a naturalist. And then I discovered human beings being the most complex animal there is. And I changed. And language, because I grew up in Switzerland, was always very prominent as well as an important aspect of being a human. And now I'm back. I'm enjoying to draw every hair, to make things look like they look at you. And so I always encourage in my coaching people to find the kinds of things that maybe when they were younger, when you talk to people in the middle age, you know, then they often are so consumed with the demands of their jobs and all that, the family, they forget they haven't done what they used to truly enjoy. So find a little bit of time to get back in touch what it was, or learn something entirely new and see what that brings you in terms of learning and discovery. Beginner's mind, you know, it doesn't have to be something you're even good at, just new, just really starting to learn again or play again. And that's also those who were here last time. Was it last time we did the Fool? At the IEC 18, maybe, where I presented with some others about the Fool and the capacity to play and not taking yourself so terribly seriously. And forgetting about the playful side of being a human being. We're all so serious, aren't we? And there's good reason. The world is in a mess. We need some people who are serious about life. But there's also for ourselves to keep. You asked about the positive, about the hope. One of you asked, do you have any hope? That's where my hope is. In people finding a source within themselves, whether that be spiritual or practical, that gives them joy. Moments of relief, moments of forgetting the terribleness of the situations. Just to re-tank, to find energy to then apply to hopefully save some of the, fix some of the problems, remain open to new information, all of the things that make us feel alive. Certainly to me, curiosity is one of the drivers all through my life.
Well, thank you very much, Susan.
Sure. You want me to read you a few lines?
Yes, everybody says.
Okay, I'll find it. So this is an introduction. Now I need to tilt it so I can actually read it. And then there is in the reader's guide. And then there is a bit on the theoretical background. And I like your feedback. I'm trying to use very simple language. And here it goes. Theoretical background. Human diversity. Before you read on, an important caveat is in order. We humans are multifaceted creatures, many character traits, physical and mental conditions, as well as special talents, influence who we are. In addition, the lottery of birth, education, native languages, the cultural surround, and our living condition all shape us and impact what opportunities we have to keep growing and expanding our view of what is real and important in life. Be assured, no person ever fits any of our psychological theories and assessments to a T. Even if someone fits a given theoretical rubric well, they may enact and express themselves within it in many different ways, unique to that person. All humans are much more than any of our measurements and theories about them can ever indicate. This is also true of the theory underlying this fable. A little bit on storytelling. language and storytelling are, of course, an essential and most ancient universal way to connect to other human beings and to share experiences and accumulate, build, and transfer knowledge. Language is likely one of the most powerful of human capacities. Through language, oral, written, paintings, we can share not just what is going on now, but what happened in the past and what we imagine might happen in the future. We can imagine fictitious pasts, places, and futures as in novels and sci-fi, and we can identify and learn from these as well. Language transmits the insights and experience of our ancestors and helps us share with each other and future generation what we have learned about being human, our responsibilities towards each other, and communicate what we think we understand. Notice the think, how much we understand is always in question. There are countless creation stories of how the world and humans came into existence. Different peoples have very different explanations about our relationship to each other, to other creatures, to the more than human natural world, to history, and to our earthly home. It is important to emphasize that our fable is based on a Western understanding of how humans developed to increasingly mature ways of seeing the world and relating to each other. Explanations can become a problem when they are taken for the truth, the only possible truth. Maybe you have heard the adage that we shouldn't take the map for the territory. That is another way of saying that as we develop, we constantly create and update our orientation maps and explain who we are, what matters to us, how life works, and how best to deal with its challenges. And yet we are rarely conscious that what we are doing is telling a story, that we are interpret what we notice. The fable is meant to illustrate 7 such widely shared stories through the Walden Pond characters: fox, bee, bear, wolf, then otter, eagle, and owl. The guidebook hopes to explain how most individuals who are part of the modern world make increasingly complex sense of their lived experience. However, Western psychological theories that describe most adults rarely tell us about all the hidden connections and the basic interdependence of all humans with each other, their environments, and the biosphere. The latter view of reality is often more evolved in indigenous cultures. And I wanted to leave this on. Where should I go now? I don't need that. And then each section has some exercises people can do. I wanted to read you, where is it? This is about child development. Here, this one I thought might be fun to hear. It's hard to be an adult. While you read the fable, you may have identified with aspects of many of the animals. You may say to yourselves, how wool takes charge and guides others is just like me when I'm at my best. And that makes you feel good about your current life situation. Perhaps you feel proud about what you have already accomplished and how you contribute to science or the arts or the well-being of others. Other times, however, you may have had mixed reactions towards the characters in the fable and feel temporarily puzzled or even hurt by the way your own way of behaving seems to be similar to one of the characters you don't like very much. Such reactions are all natural. Life continues to challenge us as we grow older. It offers us ever new trials and tribulations along the way. You're not alone. I also feel the ongoing invitation to adapt to changing life circumstances and to make sense of what is happening to me and in the wider world. Thus, my reactions and concerns are no different from yours. Sometimes I feel good about what I do and think, but sometimes I too am confused, uncertain, and disappointed with myself. And yes, being an adult requires all our strengths and attention and ongoing courage to adapt and to welcome confusion and setbacks as learning opportunities. This is so especially in these fast-changing times of chaotic politics and worldwide crisis and threats to human survival. Let's face it, it's hard being an adult. You might think it's only hard for some people and that for others it's easy. Or you believe that it's hard because you are doing something wrong, or there's some secret you haven't found yet, or because you're broken in some way. The truth is, life is hard for everyone, whether you feel safe or not, are rich or poor, married or single, with children or without, young or old, famous or unknown, or anything else. In some ways, life will offer you new problems to face at work, at home, in your community, and a resident of our little planet. In some, being an adult is no picnic. Everyone is doing the best to make sense of being a human being. In the broadest sense, what develops is your story about what it means to be here on Earth, what the challenges are for you, and what you do to cope with them. I think this is just giving you a little taste of how the guidebook will sound like.
Wow.
Yes. Thank you. The real challenge is the publishing side of things. I have no clue how to do. I've researched, of course, but it's a major hurdle. And we will see. So I hope that you will be interested enough to, when it's out, to perhaps read it and share it with others, and that would make me very happy. And feel in some ways fulfilled in a way that, since I haven't written much as an independent scholar, I never had the time, would feel good.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne, for your generosity answering so many questions and joining us. And I guess we'll give you a big round of applause.
And the questions, keep the questions. There's always more to learn and to do. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.